What I've learned is that when we improve along our doing side, it's helpful, but generally only incrementally so. But when we focus on our being side, it could be transformational. They focus on how can I gain more knowledge, more skills? What's the next degree or certificate that I need to get to be able to advance in my career? They're generally not thinking, how do I heal my mind, my body, and my heart so I could show up as a more positive force for good within the space in which I operate?
That's Ryan Gottfredson. He's known as a cutting-edge leadership development author, researcher, and consultant. He's helped hundreds of organizations develop their leaders, primarily through a focus on mindsets. His latest book, Becoming Better, The Groundbreaking Science of Personal Transformation, is a guide on how to elevate your life, impact, and being. So you'll learn 1, how to rewire limiting beliefs, 2, keys to moving past your fears, and 3, the mindset shift that sets great leaders apart. If you want a quick summary write-up of these actionable takeaways, I suggest you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Bacchitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Ryan.
Ryan, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm excited to talk about personal transformation. It's one of my favorite things.
Mine too. And I think I've kind of learned that the hard way, which is where my new book comes from. So I've got my new book coming out called Becoming Better. And part of it comes from my failures in trying to develop myself and some of the things that I've learned from that.
Intriguing. Well, could you share with us perhaps your most dramatic and instructive personal transformation?
Well, I guess let me set it up this way. I'm just curious if any of the listeners, or if you're listening to this, have you ever been in a position where you felt like you had the knowledge and the skills to be successful, yet you weren't as successful as you wanted to be? I imagine most of us have been in that space, and that's an incredibly frustrating space to be in. So I've been there in several different ways. I think about, like in high school, my goal was to get a college scholarship to play basketball. And I think I was good enough. I had the knowledge and the skills to do it, but it didn't happen. Fast forward, I'm in my doctoral program at Indiana University, and I think I had the knowledge and skills to be successful in my program, but I failed my first comprehensive exams. I went on to pass them the second time, but there was a failure moment there. And then fast forward several years later, currently I'm a professor at Cal State Fullerton. I teach and do research on leadership, but I took a leave of absence to do some consulting work with Gallup. And 10 months into the job, and I feel like I have the knowledge and skills to be successful, but 10 months in, I got fired. And I never thought I would get fired. So these are 3 examples where I feel like I had the talent, the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful, but I didn't perform at the level that I could have. And that said less about my talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and it said more about something else. And that's what I call our being side. So we've got our doing side, which is our talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we've got our being side, which is actually the quality of our character, our mindsets, our psyche, our consciousness, and even our emotional regulation abilities. And what I've come to learn is that most of the time when we feel stuck or when we fail, it has less to do with our doing side and more to do with our being side.
Mm-hmm. This is reminding me of a little bit of Pat Lencioni, teams smart versus healthy. He said, just about all the teams he encounters are smart, but not all of them are healthy. And so maybe we could zoom into the Gallup situation. Could you share some detail about what went down?
Well, I mean, there was a couple of factors that went down. One was when I took the job, they didn't necessarily communicate clearly what position I would be in. So when I got into the role, it ended up being a much smaller position than what I had anticipated. So I kind of felt like I was boxed into a corner. And what I was trying to do is try to expand out and do more than what they wanted me to do. So there was some frustration there. But ultimately, one of the things that I learned is that, and this is only in hindsight, but what I've come to learn as I reflect back on that experience is, again, while I had the talent, the knowledge and skills and abilities to be successful, I actually had mindsets that didn't set me up to be successful. And what I mean by that is, and what I've learned in the mindset research that I've done, is that we all have mindsets and they all dictate how we see and interact with the world. And our mindsets can range in quality from on one side of the continuum to being more wired for self-protection, and on the other side, be more wired for value creation. So for example, many people are familiar with fixed and growth mindsets. So a fixed mindset is actually a self-protective mindset. It's something that makes us wired to avoid learning zone challenges because we don't want to fail or look bad. Whereas a growth mindset allows us to step into learning zone challenges. And so what I learned from my experience at Gallup is that while I did have talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful, I had some self-protective mindsets, like a fixed mindset, a closed mindset, an inward mindset, that ultimately caused me to be more focused on protecting myself than on creating value for our customers, stakeholders, and team members.
That's interesting as a continuum, self-protection versus value creation. And just conceptually, I'm hanging out there like these things don't necessarily on their surface level sound like opposites of each other, like black, white, short, long, cold, hot. Self-protection, value creation, they don't sound like opposites per se, and yet you say they represent the extremes or the opposing ends of a continuum.
Yes, right? When you think about a hero, think about Superman, Spider-Man. Why do we celebrate them as heroes? Well, it's because they're willing to step into short-term discomfort, right? They're willing to step in and fight the bad guy, put themselves in harm's way. They are not being self-protective. But the reason why they're doing that is because they want to create value for the people that they're saving. So if we ultimately want to be value creators in our world, then we have to have a certain degree of willingness to step into short-term discomfort.
So it seems like there could exist a world in which you are being self-protected and also value creating. If you're doing the same comfortable thing you've been doing for a long, long time that people appreciate. Just, hey, you crank those widgets out real great, Ryan. Keep up the good work. Thanks, buddy. You're like, hey, yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years. It's easy to crank these widgets. So I suppose some of those contexts exists, although as a counterpoint, I suppose you might say, well, by sticking your neck out a little bit, you could be creating substantially more value.
Well, yes. And what this allows us to do is to connect back into our motives. Why is it that we are doing what we are doing? Are we doing the comfortable thing that we've done forever because it feels comfortable to us? Or are we doing it because we see it as our purpose and our way that we create value in our world? And ultimately, what we're finding that matters when it comes to leadership, when it comes to influence, when it comes to impact, is it's less about what we do, and it's actually more about why we do what we do. So if we're doing something from a self-protective perspective, that doesn't mean we can't create value, but the impact is going to be limited. But if we do something from this place of kind of love of creating value, it's going to have a much greater impact.
That tracks in terms of what is being transmitted and coming across and received to the people that you're interacting with as you do the thing, in terms of love, like, oh, you care about me and my happiness and satisfaction with this project, this product, this process, whatever. And it is a good feeling to hear that, as opposed to, well, this is our policy and this is what we do. And like, oh, okay, then. I didn't mean to inconvenience you, service provider. It's not nearly as edifying and valuable an experience on the receiving end.
Yeah. Let's bring this to life just a little bit more. So I'm going to give you 4 desires, and I want you to tell me if society says these are good or bad desires.
Okay.
Okay. We got a desire to look good, a desire to be right, a desire to avoid problems, and a desire to get ahead.
Look good, be right, avoid problems, and get ahead. I'd say generally society, wow, it's funny. Like, I guess It's like a hypocritical mixed message is the answer, from society on these matters. Is like, if someone told you, Ryan, what I'm all about is looking good, being right, avoiding problems and getting ahead. I'd go, yuck. I don't think I want you on my team, Ryan. That doesn't feel like the energy, the culture, the vibe we're going for here. And yet at the same time, when one looks good, it is right, avoids problems, and gets ahead, we pat him on the back like, good job. Look at this star. Wow. Ryan is so wonderful.
You're spot on. And I love how you articulated that, right? Because we could justify these desires. Because who likes to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up? Well, nobody likes that. So when we have these desires, we've got to kind of ask ourselves, where's our focus? Well, it's on ourselves. It's me looking good, me being right, me avoiding problems, and me getting ahead, right? And these are actually desires that are fueled by the more self-protective mindsets, fix, close, prevention, and inward mindsets. And when I first started to learn about mindsets, this was really eye-opening because all of these desires resonated with me, right? To your point is I didn't celebrate them. Oh, look at me. I always want to look good. But that was a core desire that my body had, that I wanted to avoid failure. But what we've got to understand is there's kind of this different side of the continuum with more value-creating mindsets and value-creating desires, such as to be able to learn and grow, to find truth, to reach a goal or a destination or a purpose, and to lift others. And here's the thing about it. If I want to learn and grow, I've got to be okay failing at times. If I want to find truth, I've got to admit that I'm wrong at times. If I want to reach my goals, I've got to wade through problems at times. And if I want to lift others, I've got to put myself on the back burner at times. And I don't know about you, but those at times moments are really tricky to navigate. And it's our mindsets that dictate which way we lean in these at times moments. Do we lean more towards self-protection when we're in a situation where we might fail? Or for example, from closed to open, do we lean more towards doubling down on being right? Or are we willing to admit that we might be wrong to explore a new way of operating? And what we find is that when people operate with more of these self-protective mindsets, is that helps them with their emotions in the short term, but inhibits their ability to create value in the long term. And so I think it's really helpful to have a framework like this to help us to awaken to how our body is wired. Is our body wired more towards self-protection or more towards value creation? And what I found, so I've got a mindset assessment. It's free on my website and people can take it and awaken to where they stand along all four of these continuums. And to kind of give you a highlight of one of the things that I found, I'll give you two highlights. One is across 50,000 people who have taken it, only 2.5% are in the top quartile for all four sets of mindsets. So most of us have some mindset work to do. Most of us, myself included, have some self-protective tendencies, right? And that's natural. But then another finding that I found interesting is I find that 60% of leaders in organizations have a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset. And what's interesting about this, if you were to speak to a room full of 100 leaders and you ask them, do any of you have a fixed mindset? I'm pretty certain nobody's going to raise their hand.
Yeah, we know that's a bad thing. So it's like, no, we don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So despite the fact that most people think that they have a growth mindset, what we find is, at least leaders in particular, 60% have a fixed mindset.
That's so funny because if we all know, if you read books and have been listening to that Improvementy podcast, that, growth mindset, good, fixed mindset, bad. And therefore we don't want to self-disclose that or that. It's like, do any of you, who in this room looks down on poor people? It's like, oh yeah, that's me. People are not going to self-disclose that. Although sometimes you can tell from people's actions and the way they're treating folks that, well, you do. So we won't cop to it. I'm intrigued that, so what's the magic of your assessment? How does it get folks to land in the fixed mindset zone without them just saying, yep, I got a fixed mindset?
Well, yeah, the assessment presents kind of polarized options to choose from. And these options, so we've got some fixed mindset options and ways of thinking, and we've got some growth mindset options and ways of thinking. And to somebody with a fixed mindset, the fixed mindset options feel right. To somebody with a growth mindset, the growth mindset options feel right. And so it's actually, what I'm finding, fairly difficult to game, because it's really about how our body perceives our world. And so when we're presented with these two options, one generally is going to feel more right to us than another, and that corresponds to our mindsets. And so with two people look at it, if I have a fixed mindset person look at it and a growth mindset person look at it, they're going to see those options and going to feel differently about those options. They're going to see one as being good and the other's going to see the other as being good. So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, lay it on us then, Ryan. If we would like to be shifting our mindset, how is that done in practice?
Yeah. So the first step is always awareness. So here's the thing. Our mindsets are the most foundational aspect of who we are, and they largely reside below the level of our consciousness. So for example, how would you say most people respond to constructive criticism? They get what?
Defensive,
right? That's our body's knee-jerk reaction. And it's something that occurs at a non-conscious level. It just happens, right? I get thrown into this defensive mode. And so that's an indicator of the quality of our mindsets. So the first step to elevating our mindsets is to become aware of our mindsets and their quality. We tend to all think that we have good mindsets because whether they're wired for self-protection or for value creation, they feel good to us because they're serving a certain job. Right? The self-protective mindsets are serving the job of protecting our emotions in the short term. So therefore, it feels good to us, right? So for example, many people seek to avoid taking risks. Well, they have a mindset about risks that kind of directs them in a non-conscious way. So, but if we could put labels and descriptions to these mindsets, then we could bring them to the level of our consciousness. Then we could become aware of them. So that's the first step, is becoming aware of the quality of our mindsets. Then when we become aware of them, we might come to learn, oh, I have more of a fixed mindset, or I might have more of a prevention mindset. Well, now that I know that, then I could do something about it. And so what we can do about it is what's helpful for us to recognize is our mindsets at a neurological level are neural connections in our brain. And the reality is, Pete, in your brain right now, you've got a fixed mindset neural connection and you have a growth mindset neural connection. Now, one of those is generally stronger than the other. And when one is stronger than the other, that becomes the default mode by which we process our world. So let's just say, I'm not saying you have a fixed mindset, but let's just imagine that you do. And that doesn't mean that you can't turn on a growth mindset at times. You can, you've just got to be intentional about doing that. But by and large, your default mode is going to be the fixed mindset neural connections. So the reason why this is valuable for us to understand is because our neural connections are a lot like muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they become. So what that means, if we want to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, we've got to regularly activate and strengthen our growth mindset neural connections. And this is kind of just simple things. This is things like meditation, gratitude journaling, watching videos related to this, or reading books or articles, having discussion questions, and then working on like journaling or self-talk exercises. Research over the last 40 years says that if we could do these types of, I'm going to call them experiments or habits on a regular basis, like daily, then over the course of about 30 days, we're going to see significant shifts in our mindsets.
Okay, so that's fixed versus growth. Can we do another one?
So there's two exercises that I mentioned that I'm going to call their global mindset exercises. So that's the meditation and the gratitude journaling. Both of those research is finding that will shift across all of our mindsets more towards being value creating. But then some of the other exercises that I mentioned, like reading books, reading articles, watching videos, journaling, discussions, we could tailor those specifically to the mindset that we're working on. So for example, if I'm working with somebody that wants to develop a growth mindset, I'm going to recommend Carol Dweck's book, Mindsets. Or if I'm going to be self-promotional, I'll recommend my book, Success Mindsets. But if I want to work on developing more of an outward mindset where we're more focused on lifting others, then I'm going to recommend the Arbinger Institute's book, Leadership and Self-Deception. So depending upon the mindset that we want to work on, we can cater those different activities. Again, books, articles, videos, journaling exercises, discussions, more tailored to those particular mindsets.
Now, Ryan, as I'm thinking about learning and neurological connections, I think the learning that is in me deepest comes from lived experience in terms of I tried a thing and this is how it went. And then I kind of get that connection up in my nervous system like, oh, stay away from that thing. That's bad news. Or, oh, hey, that worked out really great. Maybe more of that would be good. So as you lay down these things, hey, I've got a podcast about being awesome at your job. I love that sort of stuff in terms of like the content, the media, these exercises. But I'm thinking about getting out and having some real lived experience can make a world of impact on the learning and neurological connections. Are there some way? Because part of me is thinking, if I want to get better at not being defensive with criticism, I'm thinking about general, approach versus avoidance and exposure therapy types interventions. Like maybe I would do well to get a lot of criticism and somehow enjoy and appreciate it as being good for me. Do you have any thoughts on this, Ryan, in terms of how can we take it out of the safe confines, if you will, of this zone of exercise to really get some experiential learning up in there?
So great question. And to me, that's kind of a step 2 here, right? So it is helpful for us to kind of push against some of our self-protective wiring in some of these ways. And I'm going to give some examples on how to do that. But before I do that, let me kind of tell a little bit of my own story. When I first learned that I had all of these self-protective mindsets, then I'm thinking, okay, what do I do about this? Well, one of the desires that I had at the time is I wanted to start a business. I got fired from Gallup. I come back, I'm a professor at Cal State Fullerton, but I decide I still want to do this consulting work. I'm going to start up my own business, or that's what I would like to do. But I was really scared to do so because I had a prevention mindset. I was really fearful of taking risks. I was kind of raised by a dad who failed as an entrepreneur. And so I always kind of saw being an entrepreneur as being super risky and dangerous. And that's not something that I wanted to do. But so what I did first is I started to work on my promotion mindset, neuroconnections. I picked up a book. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The 5-Minute Journal. And every day I'm answering a question, which is, what are 3 things that would make today great? And this is something that activates the promotion mindset, because I used to kind of wake up in the morning and think, how do I survive today in the easiest way possible? Well, after doing this over the course of a few weeks, I'm starting to think not how do I survive today, but how do I make the most of today? And then by shifting my mindset, now I built up the courage to start actually practicing being an entrepreneur, taking the steps to start my own business. So doing the mindset work first helped me kind of break through some of my fears and insecurities, which allowed me to kind of push against some of these beliefs. So the reality is, and you're spot on. So when we start to do this mindset work, we're going to come up against places where we're hitting a roadblock or a hurdle, right? Or for example, as you mentioned, if we receive constructive criticism and we recognize that we're really quick to get defensive, well, one, I'm going to suggest let's work on developing more of an open mindset. But then 2, let's actually strategically seek out constructive criticism. And there's an approach that we could do that, right? If I'm going to seek out constructive criticism as a way to practice whether or not I get defensive, I don't want to start with my boss, right? But maybe maybe even not even my spouse, but maybe I want to start with a good friend that I've known my whole life, that I have some sort of certain degree of psychological safety with that individual. And so I want to start small. And then over time, I want to build that up and expand. So that's the second approach. So first approach is let's work on those neural connections first and foremost. Second, let's now engage in experiments to practice in these different ways.
Yeah, that's cool. And as I think about that experience of receiving that constructive criticism alongside the journaling that could really go hand in hand in terms of, I had some constructive criticism and actually it was really useful and eye-opening and valuable in these ways. And then I imagine some of the journaling is likewise reflect back into times in your past in which you've received some constructive criticism that turned out to be very useful. And then I could sort of feel a shift happening in me right now as I'm thinking, my freshman year of high school, my teacher, Mrs. Judy Federmeyer, gave me a not so great grade on my first writing assignment. And I thought, what is this? I am accustomed to A's always. This is very unsettling. But sure enough, that was extremely useful in identifying how to improve my writing. And now, what do you know? Got a couple books. I've got a career doing content stuff. So thank you, Mrs. Federmeyer, for that feedback, even though in the moment, it sure was a gut punch to look at a not great grade for perhaps the first time.
Yeah, spot on.
I guess I'm thinking about how there's variability in my day-to-day lived life experience in terms of the more that I am stressed, frustrated, exhausted, hungry, underslept, just generally don't have needs met physically and psychologically, the more likely I am to be in that self-protection mode. Like, I really don't feel like making that difficult phone call, as opposed to if I had all the things going for me in terms of, I've had some wonderful friend conversations, some good food, some good sleep. I'd feel much more equipped and ready to take that on. So how do you think about the daily fluctuation and variability of living this stuff?
Yeah, and I'm even going to expand it even wider because you're spot on. So I think it gets us to ask the question, why do some of us have more self-protective wiring? Well, it's really one of two large, broad reasons. The first is our life's experience, and the second is our current culture and our current environment. So our life's experience are things like trauma. One of the things that we're finding, the more trauma one experiences in their life, the more their body becomes wired to be self-protective. And that makes sense, right? It's our body's natural reaction to these difficult circumstances. The same thing goes with our current culture. If I'm in a work environment that doesn't feel psychologically safe, I'm naturally going to turn and be more self-protective. If I'm more hungry, if I'm more tired, right? Those are also factors that are going to impact my body. So what we're starting to connect to, right, where we started was we've got a doing side, that's our talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and we've got a being side. And that's effectively the quality of our internal operating system, how our body's nervous system is actually wired to operate. And so mindsets is one way to gauge our altitude along our being side, right? Self-protective is more towards the bottom of our being side. Value creating is more towards the top of our being side. And so there are factors that can temporarily kind of pull us down. But what the research has found is we do tend to have a center of gravity where we tend to fall along that continuum from low being to high being. And what I've learned is that as we elevate along our being side, our body's internal operating system, our nervous system, actually becomes more higher quality and more sophisticated. So that even in the times where we are hungry, tired, stressed, we're feeling a lot of pressure, our body is able to still stay in value creation mode, even though we're feeling the pressure or the pull to move into self-protection mode. So this is why this concept is really important for leaders. Because when leaders step into leadership roles, now their stress, pressure, uncertainty, complexity elevates. And if their being side isn't a very high quality, then they're going to really struggle to navigate that particular environment because they're going to pull and be more self-protective. So if we're in an environment where it's really high pressure, high stress, the only way that we'll ever be able to navigate it more effectively is not by focusing on improving our knowledge, skills, and abilities. It's actually on improving our being side, upgrading our own internal operating system so that we have the emotional regulation abilities to navigate those circumstances in a healthier, more productive way.
Well, we talked about a number of ways to do these upgrades. I'm curious, from all your research, what does the science say is the most reliably effective kind of ROI in terms of being upgrade per minute I invest in doing the thing that you would highlight for us?
Yeah, the biggest bang for our buck, so to speak, is maybe not the best place to start. So here's the way that I think is helpful to think about it is there are what I call starter level strategies, there are deeper level strategies, and there are deepest level strategies. Now, you don't have to necessarily go in that order, but I do think that there is some value to that because it opens up our body more and more to doing that really deep work. So we've talked about some of the starter level strategies. That's things like meditation, gratitude journaling, yoga, even cold plunges. Those are all factors that serve to upgrade our nervous system. So that's our surface level. We've also talked about the deeper level strategies. That's focusing on our mindsets specifically. And that's a deeper way, a more precise way of helping us elevate along our being side. But at the deepest level, this is where we get things like psychological and trauma therapy. So for example, research has found that EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, may be one of the most effective trauma therapy approaches to healing our body's nervous system. If we have, let's say ADHD is something, it's a neurodivergency that affects our being side altitude. One of the things that research is finding is that neurofeedback therapy is helpful for rewiring our mind. And then if we're really going to go for the biggest bang for our buck, it's kind of a controversial area, but it's a burgeoning area of research. And what researchers are finding is that psychedelic assisted therapy might be the best approach for us to upgrade our body's internal operating system. So those are some of the deepest level approaches.
These three interventions that you highlight here, my impression, I'm not deep in the literature, is that they're new, they're hot, they're trendy. And I'm curious though, are you saying they also have the most phenomenal results in the systematic reviews of the human randomized control trials?
Yes. And here's part of the reason why that is. Yes, they feel hot, they feel trendy. And here's why, is because of technological advances, there has been more neuroscience research that's been done in the last 10 years than all of time before that.
Okay. And we talk about healing from a trauma. I just want to define terms with trauma. Now, is it fair to say that trauma need not necessarily be an unspeakable horror or crime that befalls us, but rather something that sticks with us? For example, if someone made fun of us for something at an impressionable age and it hurt a lot, such that we want to never do that thing again, and it feels very uncomfortable if we approach that, does that qualify as quote unquote trauma in how you're using terms here?
Yes, and you define that really well. So trauma is not what happens to us. It's our body's response to what happens to us. So whether it could be something relatively insignificant that change how our mind and our body operate. Let me give you a personal example. I've got some emotional neglect in my past that has played a significant role in how I show up today. But on a more minor note, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, Pete, but I used to love to fly, like go to airports, go on trips. I loved, I just thought it was a lot of fun. Well, on one of my trips, I missed one of my flights. I was actually sitting there and I was waiting for my flight, and the time zone, I didn't switch the time zone on my watch, and I effectively watched the plane take off in front of me that I was supposed to be on. And so this is relatively insignificant. Most people have missed a flight, but for whatever reason, this jarred me, right? So now every time I go to the airport, I'm anxious about my flights. I'm checking my watch like 100 times an hour to make sure I've got the right time zone, right? And it's changed how my body functions in that airport environment. So that's a relatively insignificant thing that's occurred, but it has altered how my body functions. And therefore it would be classified as trauma.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that it's not super conscious, I imagine. As I think about my experiences of that, it's like you go to the airport, it's like, oh, I hope I don't miss this flight. No, I hate missing flights. Missing flights is the worst. I remember that time I missed a flight, it was terrible. So much so as it's not in the conscious brain, but it's just in the body. Like, I feel kind of antsy and agitated here at this airport.
Yeah. So when we start to connect to these ideas like anxiety, for example. Now, there could be some chemical imbalances, right, that are impacting our anxiety. But when we're having anxiety, that's actually an indication that we're not yet where we could be along our being side. That means that kind of our environment is feeling overwhelming and our body isn't able to deal with that environment. And so the only way we're going to be able to navigate that environment is ultimately, and this is kind of why I love focusing on this. And here's the core message is if we want to become better, transformationally so, we've got to focus on healing our mind, our body, and our hearts. And what's kind of eye-opening to me is that when most people try to improve, they generally don't go there. Where they go is they focus on how can I gain more knowledge, more skills? What's the next degree or certificate that I need to get to be able to advance in my career? They're generally not thinking, how do I heal my mind, my body, and my heart so I could show up as a more positive force for good within the space in which I operate?
Yeah, that's very well put in terms of a distinction. And, boy, there's probably so many reasons for that. It's uncomfortable for us independently, individually, and it's almost not okay to say in a professional work environment. In terms of it's like, you keep making some sloppy mistakes in your client deliverables, and so it's like, what I need you to do is heal your traumas. And it's like, are you allowed to say that to me? Should I talk to HR about you, sir? But that might actually be what is necessary in terms of if there is a block, an emotional thing going down that prevents them from doing the things that need doing, it may very well not be a matter of learning these spell check software or whatever the thing is.
Well, let me give you an example. So in the consulting work that I do with organizations, I'm helping to develop leaders. And some of the organizations that I work with, we're kind of helping leaders go from good to great. Well, sometimes I get called in, kind of head of HR calls me up and says, we've got a CEO that is really wrecking havoc. And it's kind of operating at this bad level. And they kind of say, can you help this guy? Can we get him from bad to good? And generally because I want to help the organizations and I want to help these leaders. In every single one of these circumstances where I've done this coaching with CEOs that I'm going to say are operating at this bad level, and we're trying to help them just to step up to that good level, every single time, what comes up in the coaching process is they bring up trauma from their childhood. I've had one CEO tell me, when I was a boy, my best friend was my bike. I had another CEO tell me, when I was a kid, my parents divorced and I didn't really see my dad and my mom really wasn't around. I never was recognized. Another executive, this wasn't a CEO, but another executive said, when I was a boy, I could never please my dad, no matter what I did. And all of these things have left an imprint on these leaders that causes them to show up as a leader in really self-protective ways. Some of them are, I need to be seen. And so I'm willing to run over others in order to get the fame, the accolades, whatever that might be. And ultimately, it's because they're driven by past hurts that have made them develop certain insecurities and fears that are holding them back. And here's what I've learned. We've all got these, right? We've all got past hurts. We've all got fears. We've all got insecurities. And unless we're willing to lift up the rug and start to look at them and start to do work with them, they're going to continually hold us back from becoming the people that we want to become.
All righty. Thank you. Well, Ryan, tell me, anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about your favorite things?
I think we've covered it, right? But I want people to just understand that there's really two paths that we can develop ourselves. One is by focusing on our doing side, and that's what most people focus on. That's our education systems, our athletic programs, most of our organizational development efforts. But what I hope we've opened up for people is to help them to see that there's another path. There's another side for them to focus on, and that's their being side. And I know that for many people, this is new. And so let's open up this so that they have the opportunities to now start to do this work. And what I've learned is that when we improve along our doing side, it's helpful, but generally only incrementally so. But when we focus on our being side, it could be transformational.
Big thanks to Ryan for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out.
One sponsored checkout is strawberry.me career coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, now, can you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is by Anais Nin, and it is, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." And I think that speaks to some of this being side growth that we've been talking about.
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
I will point people, there's a great TED Talk by Aaliyah Crum, and it's all about the placebo effect, and it dives into mindsets. And there's several studies in that I just think are incredibly fascinating. But one of those studies, it identifies how some of these exercises, like we've talked about, watching a 3-minute video can shape our engagement, our performance, and even our blood pressure 2 weeks later. Right? That's one video.
I want to watch that video. And hopefully in a good way. It shapes it in a good way, or it makes our blood pressure sky high. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the video. So they showed them a video, they had 2 groups. One group saw a video that said was stress is bad. And another group saw a video of how stress is good. And that the people who saw the stress is good video, they had higher engagement, higher performance, and lower blood pressure 2 weeks later than the group who saw the stress is bad video.
All right. And a favorite book?
I'll go with The Choice by Edith Eger. This is a memoir of a Holocaust survivor, and it's less about her Holocaust experience and more about her life recovering from her experience. And I think she is such a great case study of doing this being side work, which really started 20 to 30 years after her Holocaust experience. And it's just an incredibly moving book.
All right. And a favorite tool?
Well, I would say a tool that I use every day on my phone is the Insight Timer app. That's what I use to meditate as a part of my being side work.
Mm-hmm. And a favorite habit?
Next up, right after I'm done meditating, then I pick up my book, the 5-Minute Journal. And to me, that's been game changing. So I've been doing that for the last 7 years, and I credit that to most of my growth and development.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you share that seems to really connect and resonate and folks quote back to you often?
Well, I hope some of the ideas around doing side and being side help, but I think a quick little tagline might be success starts with our mindsets. And if we want to elevate our success, we've got to focus on our mindsets.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Yeah, point them to my website, ryangottfredson.com. Also, any social media outlets. And in fact, if people wanted to comment find me on social media, and if they were to comment in that they listened to this show, then I'll give them access to my mindset assessment. And I'll even offer up a free phone call with them to walk them through their mindset assessment results.
Oh, cool. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, just go to my website. I've got 2 personal assessments that are there that are free. We've talked about one of those, the free personal mindset assessment. And then there's also a vertical development assessment, which is a different way to measure our altitude along our being side. So those are a couple of free resources that can help you awaken to your altitude on your being side.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Ryan, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, when it comes to being awesome at your job or anything else, I think Ryan is really highlighting a fantastic framework here. That I've got 2 pathways, upgrading your doing and upgrading your being. And just maybe take a look at any action plan for development that you're cooking up and see, oh, oopsies, this is all on doing. maybe there's some smart things I should put in here on upgrading my being as well. Good stuff from Ryan. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we referenced, please pay us a visit at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1059. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Are you feeling stuck in your career or lacking employment at the moment? Experiencing symptoms of job dissatisfaction? You might be suffering from a common condition known as career stagnation. But don't worry, there's a solution. Monster.com. Monster.com offers a comprehensive suite of career-boosting tools designed just for you. Our free resume review and AI interview prep tool will help you stand out from the crowd. Need more guidance? Dive into our career advice articles for expert tips and insights. And don't forget to check out our salary tools to ensure you're getting paid what you're worth. Side effects may include a new job, increased confidence, and a brighter future. Consult Monster.com today and take the first step towards your new career. Ready for your next job opportunity? Visit Monster.com now.